Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. We're going to get started. I'm sure there'll be other people joining us along the way. Just wanted to thank everyone for the time today to join us on this call. My name is Dean Prentice. I'm the General Manager here at Mount Washington. To my right is Dan Cayley, our Director of Facilities and Maintenance, and to my left is Jamie Erickson, who manages the water utility here on the mountain. Also to the left is, see waving there is Tim Defford, our Director of Hospitality. That's who is here in the room today with us. We wanted to take this time today, and I guess first of all, be able to thank everyone for the time taken to be able to send in questions. Quite honestly, the amount of questions that we got was overwhelming, and we're going to do our best. We try to consolidate a lot of the questions that are pertinent to what we're going to talk about today within this presentation. A lot of the technical questions and those sorts of things we will not be getting to in this presentation. Really, our presentation today is about the current situation with some comparisons to last year to help you understand where the water has been, where it is, what's triggered this conservation notice. Talk a little bit about the drought situation here in the Eastern Vancouver Island. A little overview of our snowmaking reservoir, measures the resort's taken to be able to help conserve water, a little bit about what we've asked you to do, some additional measures should the situation worsen, and some of the conversations that are taking place between ourselves and a few other organizations as we work through this. Some long-term planning initiatives that we'll be looking at, and at the end of the day, really about maintaining this communication as we work through this conservation, water conservation. So our obligation to you in order to maintain communication and ongoing transparency of the current situation. So that's what we hope to get through today. We've got about 45 slides to get through. So my guess will be about a 45-minute presentation or so with regards to information. This video is, I know there's been lots of requests around it, whether it's being recorded. It is being recorded. And anyone who does request that will be happy to share a copy of that video by request. So without further ado, we're going to get right into our presentation. First off, we're going to start with Jamie Erickson. He's going to give you a run through of his group of guys that he works with down in the utilities department, and then walk you through the infrastructure that we have in place and some of the data with regards to the springs last year, and show you this year and what we've been seeing as far as the level of primarily the middle spring, and what prompted us to move into a conservation notice. So take it away, Jamie.
Thanks, Steve. So what we're going to look at here is just a brief overview of the Mount Washington distribution system. Next slide. So the utility staff underneath me, I'm the supervisor of the utilities department, which is the water and wastewater in the resort. I have Tyler Balsito, he's my lead hand, and I have Keith Parley, who's just that utilities operator. So we draw water from 3 sources located on the ski hill. The West Spring, which is located near the Hawk Chair, about midway up. The Middle Spring, which is on the Rainbow Bench, about midway down Rainbow. And on the East Spring, which is near the Sunrise Chair, around the mid-bench of that as well. So it's important to note here that Rick's reservoir, the snowmaking reservoir, is not attached to the distribution system as a raw water supply source. So you can see here in this info are this photo that we have the locations of the West Spring, the Middle Spring, and the East Spring. The West Spring is located, like I said, about halfway up the Hawk Chair, and that water is transmitted via a transmission pipeline over to the Middle Spring. The Middle Spring basin itself holds the water for both the West Spring outflow and the Middle Spring. The East Spring you can see over by Rick's Res there. That is located on the furthest southeastern or southwestern corner of the resort. Next slide. So for treatment, we currently UV treat and chlorinate our water prior to being stored in our treated water storage tank. The treated water storage tank has a capacity of 500,000 gallons. And during normal operation, the tank level is kept between 29.5 and 28.5 feet. And the total tank height is 30 feet. So it only varies by approximately like 1 foot during operations. Once it hits 28.5, that's when the pumps will kick back on and we'll top it back up to 29.5 feet. So here's a map of our distribution system. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, that's the treated water storage tank, which is located just right beside the Marmot recovery facility. The blue lines trace the way the water will flow down through the resort. As we're a gravity-based system, it starts at the top. It comes around the front of the Bear and Deer Lodge to the main lodge, but there's also a branch that spreads down and goes down towards the general store and then feeds in through Dugan's lot into 799. Those two lines pass through 799 with some spurs going out, makes its way down towards the Paradise Meadows area, or sorry, Paradise Lodge, transmits directly down to Nordic Road, and then branches off both to the Raven Lodge and towards Beaufort Heights subdivision. Next. So we're going to have a quick look at what we were experiencing for normal operations last year, and these are trending shots between November 16th and January 9th, 2021 that we're going to look through. So it's important to note in this slide here, it's basically it's November 16th to December 1st. You can see the yellow lines are pump cycles, so that's when the pumps will kick on and kick off. The red line up top is the height of the treated water storage tank, and that's varying up and down throughout the day. And you can see that the purple line there, the middle spring line, you can see how evenly it is. So at this point, it's steady. It's sitting at about 64 inches deep right now in this shot. Next slide. So here's December 1st through December 10th. So once again, you can see no more operations are happening. The tank is varying by its 1 foot of height. The middle spring itself is level. We had a cold snap, so that's what there's an anomaly on that, where the transducer head just wasn't reading properly because the top layer of the water was ice. December 10th to the 20th. Now you can see this is where the resort started to pick up pace as we're getting busier. You can see the pump cycles are actually longer. They're quite visibly longer. The treated water storage tank height varies. So you can see the weekend dips as it goes down, and then it climbs back up over the nights, and then it drops down during the day, and we go through that cycle. That happens pretty normally. Next slide. So this slide is December 20th through the 30th, 2021. So this is the start of our main Christmas season. You can see the pump cycles are really long. The tank drops down and then it recovers overnight. What's important to note here is that even though we started pumping 24 hours a day on December 26th, which you can see by the yellow line on the right-hand side of the graph, that's just a solid line going across, which indicates that we are pumping. And we started on the 26th and we stopped on, I believe it's January 9th, which would be the next slide. But so go back, please. But it's important to note here that the middle spring level is consistent. You can see all the way across that the height doesn't change. Next slide. So here we are, this is the December 30th through January 9th, 2022, or sorry, January 9th, 2022. And it's we have to notice here that even though we are pumping 24 hours straight during this period, the middle spring stays level. So you can see that all the way across. But what you can notice is the fluctuation in the treated water storage tank. So during the day, you'll see the drawdowns, and then the spikes up are an overnight fill. And then that pattern continues, and the tank got down to a low of approximately 25 feet during this period, which isn't uncommon for a busy resort. We're pumping 24 hours a day. We're pumping straight through that week. So here's a drought comparison. This is between 2019 and 2020. Now, if you pay attention to the top, you can see that the drought conditions really taper off at the end of September, or sorry, at the start of September. 2020, we get into the same scenario, but approximately the first week of September, we're at stage 3, but at the end of the month, we moved to stage 2. By October 14th, we're into stage 1 drought conditions. So that's important to note, to that trending pattern of the water, or basically our rains come near sometime in September, between the middle of the month to the first week of November, is quite common for us to get heavy amounts of rain, which is indicated by the drought condition charts. In 2021, last year, we had a pretty severe weather event. You can see from the start, or from the end of June through July to mid-August, we're in stage 4. Then August, we moved to stage 5, September, stage 4. And then the end of September, we moved back to stage 1 already. So that we had heavy rainfalls in that time, which is normal for us. And then after that, we go to a drought level of 0. Now, if you look at the bottom one, you can see that the chart moves all the way to December 1st. Now, that's important to note because the other 3 above it ended either in October or November. Currently, we are still in a stage 3 drought. In November 24th, which is a time of year we should be getting heavy amounts of rain or snow, the drought conditions actually increased in the Vancouver Island Basin. Next slide. So we're going to have a look at some operations from September 16th this year forward. So this is what the concern was that caused a lot of issues for us. So on November 16th, we really noticed that the basin, you can see on the far left side of the chart, that the basin wasn't recovering between its pump cycles. It doesn't peak out above or equal to where it was. So what we did is we moved some water that we did have in the East Spring that we can take, and we were able to pull a partial fill from it, which allowed the middle spring to start to recover. You can still see the line bouncing up and down, troubling, but it's still within a normal pattern. But on the 21st, you can see around the 20th, 21st, that pattern changes dramatically, where the refill rate after a pump cycle was not strong enough. So essentially, what we were pumping into the distribution system was way more than we were being recharged in our raw water sources. So on the 21st, we actually contacted Island Health to discuss this with them. And then immediately following that, we started looking for alternate sources that we could pump from. And now while we're doing that, you can see where we're getting alternate sources approved. You can still see the downward trend of the height of the middle spring. And that's important to notice because that's not usual from what we normally see. Next slide. So here's the same week, 1 year apart. So November 16th to December 1st, or sorry, not the same week, but the same time frame. November 16th to December 1st on both slides. The difference is quite dramatic. You can see on the left, stable line in our reservoir, or sorry, in the raw water basin, which is the middle spring. And you can see the pump cycles happen, whereas on the right, the basin, the purple line is quite jagged, and on the right-hand side of it, it's dropping dramatically. So that was the cause of the concern, and that's when we started contacting the authorities to figure out a way of what we need to do and the actions and the steps we need to take. So this is December 1st through 13th, 2022. The screenshot was actually taken this morning. So on this chart, you can see right after December 4th, the next line forward is December 5th. It was in that period that we got the okay from Island Health to use the water from that alternate source. It took time for the test to be approved and then the okay to be given by our health officer to use that water in our distribution system. Once we had that approval, we were able to supplement the middle spring, or sorry, the East Spring water with this alternate source. And we were able to give the middle spring a break per se. And you can see how much we started to climb. So this week we've been diligently at it and making sure that the middle spring is still climbing. So we wanted to reach as much water as we could in that source prior to the Christmas break starting. So here's some resort usage numbers in comparison. Now on the left is 2021 November. You can see the average usage isn't very high. There's an anomaly at the bottom of it where we had a water line break on November 30th at unit 94. And so that's why the high consumption on those 2 days. But you can still see how low the consumption is at normal. And you can see throughout the month coming into
Just
that.
identify that's cubes of water.
Yeah, oh, sorry, that is, yes, cubic meters of water. And then as we go through the month of December, you can see the usage starting to increase. Now, what's highlighted in those Excel spreadsheet numbers, the 26th to the 9th, is the period at which we will pump 24 hours. And that's what we cannot do this year. We cannot have 24-hour pumping cycles for multiple days in a row. So that's what we're trying to avoid through water, with water conservation and ongoing efforts right now. Here's a comparison or a simple chart to just the resort usage November 16th to the 1st. Once again, you can see how low the water usage is on your left. So those numbers once again are in cubic meters. But even though the usage is low, you can still see how much is diminishing the capacity of the middle spring itself. So the jagged purple line once again is the water going down with every pump cycle. So here's our resort usage December 1st to December 11th. Now, I do believe we got the notices out between, I think, starting on December 3rd or 4th. Yep. So you can see that coincided with our ability to use an alternate source. And from that point on, we've been able to manage. So we're still using a lower amount of water right now, but conservation efforts are still important because the middle spring has not reached full flow yet. So we had a question is, why was the water conservation measures set out in December rather than earlier? And we had heard rumors that there were water shortages in October. So it's not unusual for the mountain to go through dry periods through the fall. If you're a resident up here, we quite often see those dry periods all the way through and leading into, typically early October. The East Spring itself typically runs dry in the summer months, and the Middle Spring this year did not show signs of reduced flow until approximately the mid-November timeframe. Once we started seeing those reduced flows and we weren't meeting the current demand, we met to discuss the courses of action. And like I said, we contacted Island Health and we put together a conservation notice and we sent that out to the public. So here we have a question about the potential of a boil water advisory. It's like, what would trigger a boil water advisory? Essentially for us, we have two things that can do that. On a bi-weekly basis, we're supposed to be taking our samples down to Island Health and they do the test. So we don't do our own testing for our water results. So if one of those tests did not pass standards and there was a high coliform count or a fecal count in there, then we would immediately go into a boil water and they would contact us to implement that. The other thing that can make us move to a boil water is if we have an NTU, which is the turbidity of the water, of an NTU of 1 for 24-hour period. So if we have that habit, if our incoming raw water hits a turbid state, then we would have to call boil water advisory as well. So who's responsible for checking the water levels that feeds the resort? How often do we check them and what are the thresholds behind implementing water restrictions? So the three of us and my utility staff, we are the responsible for checking those daily. Now we're at all the locations every day, and we can do that both through electronic monitoring devices, and we do it physically as well. We go and look at it. So this is the first time that we've ever been in this scenario. Essentially, this was the trigger that we hit when our daily usage exceeded the recharge rate of the springs. So this is what exactly needs to happen. Next slide. All right, so this is our sampling frequency. Like I had mentioned before, we're mandated by Island Health to take our samples down. So we have to sample 4 locations throughout the distribution system. And we are required also to sample our raw water once a month. So I've talked about Island Health recently, and during this period while the low water scenario is going on, we're going to be increasing our distribution system sampling to a weekly basis, just to ensure that we're being proactive about not harming public health. What are the water priorities on the mountain between all the users groups, let's say the business operation, homes, fire suppression, clubs, etc. So water use is not prioritized to anyone. We all have equal access to the water. The system is gravity fed from the top down. from a water use perspective, this past 4 days, we've been tracking it. The resorts use only approximately 7% of the total usage per day. So the remainder of the use of that would be to the resort, to the rest of the resort itself. So this is what I was saying about we're doing our part for conservation. You can look at that. This, we only started tracking was daily on December 10th. You can see the day use only used 11 cubic meters water, the Bradley only 4, and the total resort consumption that day was 260 cubic meters. The 11th, 16 and 4 respectively with 311. The 12th, 16 and 8 with 356 cubic meters. And then December 13th, we had 14, 3, and 213 used. So since we've opened this year, the 2 largest resort buildings on average have only used about 6.7% of the resort's total daily usage of water. So will the fire hydrants continue to work at current water levels? Yes, as long as the treated water storage tanks remains full, and right now it is, we are operating completely normally, those fire demands can be met, and the hydrants will continue to have appropriate flows. Over to
Okay.
Dan.
Thanks, Jamie.
Gee, tough act to follow there.
Dan's just going to take you through some of the rich reservoir construction details, its purpose, those sorts of things. So take it away.
Okay, my name is Dan Cayley. I'm the Director of Maintenance and Facilities here at Mount Washington. I've been in this role since 2019 and have been employed here since 1993. So seen a few things. Since taking on this role, one of the tasks I've been involved with is the installation and the operation of the snowmaking systems and managing some of its water sources. One of the biggest misconceptions is that the snowmaking system draws water directly from our potable water system. This is simply not true. The water for snowmaking is pulled from what we call Rick's Reservoir. So my little presentation is going to be about a little history on the development of Rick's Res and discuss how it's filled and how it happens to overflow. Before I get into that, it just occurred to me that part of this misconception may have come from the fact that prior to 2019, we had a partial snowmaking system on Green Acres using those air lances in the carpets that did run on the potable water system. That was only used between 2016 and 2018, and we have not used that since. So that eliminates that out of the equation. Okay, so that's okay. Let's look at that slide. Rick's Res obviously is the big blue lake there on the right-hand side. It's located mid-mountain on the south side of the property between Ski Run Shum's Delight and Rick's Ride. It was initially developed from what was a big wetland area to be for the purpose of supplemental water for fire flow protection. The source water by design was to be overflow water from East Spring, combined with surface runoff through a series of water bars up the ski run and directed into the res. When we needed fire flow, it was to be pumped to the treated water facility and then into the treated water tank via a small pump house that's located just off of the Rick's Ride side of the run. For this purpose, you can go ahead and change the slide there. Everything was done to appease all of the governing health, safety, legal bodies at the time. We consulted with or got full reviews by all of the above documents there, but there was much more. I just included those just for a bit of an overview, give you an idea of what we had to go through. Fleener and Associates environmental geotechnical reviews by McElhaney Consulting Services. We needed approvals by the Ministry of the Environment, the CVRD, the Land and Water BC, Island Health. Then and only then could we even get a shovel in the ground. Once we did, the project was completed by Uplands Excavating under the supervision of McElhaney Consulting Services. So everything was done to appease all of the governing health, safety, and legal bodies. We consulted with and got a full review from, After the initial construction and filling, the water unfortunately was deemed too turbid for domestic usage due to the nature of the clay layer that lined the bottom of the surface of the reservoir. Also, we exceeded the some MAC levels on metals, aluminum, barium, that sort of thing. So the water was not approved by VHA or the provincial comptroller as a potable water source. So this water could only be added to our utility for emergency purposes, and in conjunction, more than likely a boil water advisory would have to be implemented. So even though it still met all the requirements as an emergency fire flow reserve, it was never at any time put into our potable system. And that was basically lasted between 2007 and 2019. Next slide. And in 2019, that was when PGRI, the new ownership group, decided that an investment was going to be made into snowmaking, and that Rick's Reservoir was the best candidate to be expanded and utilized as the water source for snowmaking. Again, a waterline hydrogeological assessment was made, a seismic refraction survey from Frontier Geosciences was made. Again, McElhaney Consulting Services oversaw the whole expansion process. And the reservoir and the construction house with what was the name of the engineering firm? Ridgeline. And then it was at this time that we changed the water licensing of that reservoir from potable to industrial snowmaking. Okay. So you can see there, that's during the construction, that's construction of the pump house, and underneath that clay area is the intake. When the full reservoir went full, the reservoir now holds an estimated 5 to 6 million gallons of water, and it's filled naturally by surface runoff and a groundwater source in the back northwest corner of the bank that only flows when the east spring has water and is overflowing. During snowmaking, we have never diverted water from the east spring into Rick's Res, and only this is the first year ever. Well, I think we have documented photos from about August the 18th or 19th was that water stopped flowing into Rick's Res. It's the first time we've ever seen water stop flowing into the Res. So from mid-August on, not a drop from anywhere flowed into the Res. There was no surface water runoff. It never rained, and we were able to monitor that through the transducer head in the pump house that gives us day-to-day accurate levels of the depth of the water in the pump house. In a normal year, when we do not, so go ahead, next slide. Yeah, go to the next slide. Yeah, so when we do not use any of the water for snowmaking and the reservoir is full, the water comes into the backside. There's a little snowy patch up there. That's kind of the area where the water trickles in over the bank into the reservoir. It just overflows into Ramparts Creek. This is basically the condition 99% of the time, unless we drain the reservoir for any reason. The reservoir is full whenever there's natural runoff or just the overflow from the aquifer flows into Rick's Res, and it just overflows into Ramparts Creek. It takes a lot of water to make snow. And just to give you an example of what the refresh rate of Rick's Res has been, you stick back to the other slide there. Last year alone, during the winter, we used almost 11 million gallons of water. So the reservoir only holds 5 to 6, and we used 11 million gallons in about 4 months. So 4 to 5 million gallons of refresh in the winter, doing winter temps, refilled that reservoir. And then after we were done making snow, all the remaining water that kept refreshing that reservoir just overflowed through those overflows into Ramparts Creek. And just on another side note, it's another misconception about snowmaking that when you make snow that we're actually consuming the water. It's actually not true. You don't consume anything. It's just taken from one source and put into another source in another form. So it's kind of a convenience for us that we put that snow back into our own watershed. So it then will seep through ground and surface runoff back into our own watershed to basically be used at a later date. So it does not get consumed, just gets repurposed. This spring, we made the decision to drain the reservoir for an inspection and some slope maintenance. And because of the drought scenario, when the water turned off or basically stopped flowing in there mid-August, we never got any refill rate from the overflow from the East Spring or through any surface runoff. So we have very small amount of water to make snow with. We made snow once on December 1st, used a total of 250,000 gallons, 946 cubic meters. And we used what we could and then stopped to leave enough water in there to meet our required fire flow reserve, which was the whole purpose of RICS in the first place. So that water is still in the res. We are able to take it out of that res and put it into the East Spring if a fire were to occur to meet that minimum requirement. That's basically all I got.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Just going to go into a few other things. I believe in the water conservation notice we sent out, we highlighted a few things that we're doing. There's probably more to that now, at least at the resort level, about shutting off water stations. We're encouraging all of our staff. We can see staff every day walking around with their own jugs of water for their various departments and for themselves. In food and beverage, we're using disposable or compostable plates and cutlery. The majority of that is either biodegradable and compostable product that we're using. So trying to be environmentally friendly as much as there is additional waste. But that really helps us from a dishwashing perspective. Lots of water gets run through the dishwashers and we're trying to avoid that at all costs. That's same with regards to the draft and not using our glass washers. So anything you'll find up here is going to be in a bottle or can product form. We also won't be using our fountain machines up in the cafeteria. Again, it uses water to mix with the soft drink syrup, so it will only be bottled product available. Coffee machines right now are looking to be converted to use bottled water, so they will be off the resort source and only be used off of bottled product. So we're working through that right now. You may have seen yesterday we had 24 new porta potties show up to be placed around the resort. There's some here up at the lodge, some down in Nordic, some in the Hawk parking lot. So we've moved them around the resort to be able to make sure that they're available. And as a good fallback, if we do need to end up closing the washrooms in the lodge. At Slopeside, the rooms that we manage within Slopeside accommodations, we're supplying our guests when they come through with a 4-liter jug of water per day that they're here to help manage their consumption or reduce their consumption of any tap water. And our maintenance guys are diligent every day right now, going through washrooms, making sure toilets aren't leaking. This can be a real consumer of water. Is one of the other things we've done. We've actually shut down one of the resort freezers that we use because it is a continuous circulation of water in order to maintain that freezer. The compressor it's not circulating, it's not reusing water, it's running water through that. So we've actually shut down one of our main freezers to help reduce the water flowing through that. Other steps that we're considering. So if we need to, we're monitoring this on a day-to-day basis. You saw earlier the amount of water consumption that is being used by the lodge is a very small portion overall, but we do have our big busiest season ahead of us and then over the next 3 weeks or so. So it's something we're going to keep a very close eye on. If we do see increase or not just increase, but the springs themselves not being able to facilitate the amount of use, that we will look to shut down our washroom facilities and have them accessible for any other some specific needs users. But we'll also look to one of the things we've been looking at is to secure a water storage, so or bead on a water tanker, potentially that we could purchase, bring up to the resort, fill with potable water. And again, this is really when we get down to real severe situation as far as the possibility of running out of water, that we could have this potable water container that could fill portable water containers for residents around the property. So those are things we're working on right now. We do have a meeting with the CRVD and the Oyster River Fire, who are responsible to respond to fires here at the mountain. We have a meeting with them this week to review fire prevention, water, and just the available resources. So if we are able to use our actual snowmaking system, we'll be looking at that with the fire department, as well as other things that we can do to make sure that the fire flows are available. And the other one, we have a meeting coming up this week with the Emergency Management BC. So there's going to be Ministry of Tourism's on the call, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Forests, especially the water controllers. So, our news is not localized here. The government is concerned. So we'll be getting on a call with them just with regard to some advanced planning to address a potable water shortage. So we'll be happy to share some of the outcomes of those meetings to you. Other long-term planning, especially as we look at mitigating from this happening again. There's a couple of things we're looking at. So we've already engaged a conversation with an engineering firm to discuss site possibilities, timing, costs related to adding another 500,000 gallon storage, potable storage tank on site. So that's probably first and foremost. The other one would be, we haven't talked about all of our licensed, that is in our water report for those that have read through that, but we do have a license for Goss Creek. It's our license that we have that we can pull the most water from. The challenge is it's 3 kilometers away from our treatment facility. So we need to start to investigate on how we can access that water. There'll obviously be a pump and pipe situation that would be both time consuming and costly to be able to do that. But those are things that we're going to look to long term as far as our planning and addressing further needs for water shortages. The mountain itself is planning to bring up a water. This is one of the questions, was whether the mountain was planning to bring up water supply to add to the reservoir, and whether there was any other creeks that we could draw from. So we are in discussions with trucking water to the resort in an emergency. And that's being reviewed both with the CRVD and Emergency Management BC. So again, we'll be able to update further once we have a little bit more information around that. And I think Jamie alluded to the sources. So Duckenfield Creek is also a licensed creek that we can draw water from. Unfortunately, it's not flowing very well right now, just like every other tributary around. There is a collection point that Duckenfield Creek was flowing into. We thought we had an opportunity to be able to capture that water and move that into the East Spring, but we did do a water quality test on that, and it did not meet the standards required to put it into our potable system. So we could not use that at this time. And then there was as Jamie said, another source was located just below the East Spring. There was a water source below there that we tested, sent in, and it was approved by Island Health for us to be able to move that water into the East Spring. And quite honestly, that's been a difference maker for us at this point. That's why you've seen in the graphs the increased flow of water in the Middle Spring, because over the last few days we have been able to use the East Spring as our primary filler into the potable water system, and we've allowed the Middle Spring to recover. So I think that's a really good thing for us at this point. And if we can continue to have that source water and enter it into the East Spring, it'll give us the ability to balance back and forth between the two springs, and will give us a much better opportunity to be able to stay ahead of this. There's a question just around with the mountain operation. Many of the owners' units or rent out their units. And visitors, as we know, are probably not as likely, short-term visitors are probably not as likely to conserve. So how are we handling this? I mean, again, this is an individual owner responsibility is the way we see it, just like our responsibility of the units we're managing in Bear and Deer Lodge. We are personally, we're sending out a pre-arrival notices to guests to alert them of the conservation in advance. Again, as mentioned, we're offering those guests checking into our managed units a 4-liter jug of water per day to stay and help reduce their tap water use. But you know, if there's owners out there that are renting their units, I'm not saying they need to offer water, but certainly there should be an education process that they're telling the guests that are coming that there's water conservation in place and ask them to respect those things. That's the real, I guess, purple elephant in the room is how do we manage that? And there's no way we can manage someone's behavior when they're inside one of any of these units. All we can do is ask for, and along with the resort, just reach out to people that are coming and emphasize the conservation message and hope that there are good people in the world that will help us in this fight. You know, it's a large variable, and we can see over the 3-week period here as we get into Christmas that a lot of water can be consumed. So it's going to take everybody's effort to get through this. How's the resort going to keep us updated on the water use? So something that we are going to be very transparent with. As you know, on the website, we do have a water conservation area which you could go to. We're going to be adding daily a notation in there. We're going to provide you the daily use that the resort used compared to the prior year, and also give you the state of the current springs and what water we're seeing produced. So we're going to add that on a day-to-day basis, and we'll add a note to that. Hopefully that note is that the conservation methods that we're all involved in here are making a difference and that things continue to look good and stable. Or if things are not progressing as they should, some notification around continued diligence and other steps that you could possibly take. I think and lastly here, someone asked about the confidence level. Assuming we have enough water to get through the season, I think the next three weeks are our most critical stage. There's no question the holiday season, the volume that comes to the resort cannot be reduplicated in any way at any time through the season. It is our peak volume, and the conservation efforts need to be top priority for everybody through this period of time. As I said, with the addition of the water leading into the East Spring has certainly created more optimism for us as far as trying to maintain levels in our potable water storage. You know, the springs continue to produce, and if they do continue to produce, we are at this point cautiously optimistic that we can get through the season. But again, all of these measures that we've put out and any other ones that you personally can think of that will help, it's going to take all of those efforts in order to get there. And you know, again, can't stress enough, over the next 3 weeks are probably our most critical time. So that's the overview. That's the overview of our current situation in comparison to prior years. Gives you a sense of why the message came out when it did, and what triggered that. Clearly, it was just if our recharge rate does not meet the demand, that raised some red flags, and with some consultation through Island Health, that's when the message came out. So this is a situation we're in, unfortunately. I don't like it as much as anybody else. You know, again, we're optimistic that we can get through this with everybody's help. Our promise to you is to continue to be transparent and communicate through our website, and keep you updated. If there's other further restrictions, quite honestly, Vancouver Island Health would like probably a little bit more strongly worded restrictions. We look at this as really a conservation, and it's difficult as we ask people to do things. We don't know who's doing what. I guess all you can do is hope that everybody's doing their part, whether that be big or small, to be able to help with the situation. And honestly, when we looked at even today, 213 cubes of water was used yesterday in the lodge. We had about 1,000 skier visits up here. I don't have an exact comparable, but we were utilizing more water when we weren't open than what we did yesterday with 1,000 guests up here, and obviously more people in accommodations. So that was real encouraging for us today, both to see the recovery of the middle spring correspond with a reduced amount of water being consumed. So from us to you, thank you for the efforts that you've put in to date. Looking at that water consumption today certainly shows that the efforts are making a difference. And I think that's what's important today, that we continue to make that effort and help each other get through this. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their time today. Again, this has been recorded. If anybody wants a copy, we'll do that upon request and send that out to you once we have that available. Again, thank you for your time and attention today. We look forward to continuing the dialogue and keeping you updated. And yeah, thank you very much.